Welcome to Daring To, a podcast that finds out how CEOs and entrepreneurs navigate today's business world, the conventions they're breaking, the challenges they faced, and the decisions that they've made. And lastly, just what makes them different. Well, welcome. And today, on today's podcast, starting back, what better way to start back my podcast than to have two unconventional, breaking boundaries, really showing what Daring To is all about. I have with me Zach Miller-Frankel, who is the founder and co-founder and CEO of Andrson, and Neil Dunne, who's the co-founder and COO of this. Now, guys, I have to say, I'm a lover of music. I'm a bit older than the two of you, right? You two are like youngsters, but are doing some amazing things around music. And interestingly, it started because you both had an interest in music, although you had kind of different upbringings. Now, Zach, I understand that you're in New York, like from the States maybe, and are living in Dublin. Is that right?
I am, yeah. I am a statesman who, don't worry, was brought up on music far older than I. So I was brought up on opera and doo-wop and Woodstock soundtrack and all that. And made the hop across the pond 4 years ago to expand my management company, which is where I met Neil, and we decided to go into business together.
Well, and you know, that's great. Number one, it's great to see like talent come across the pond, if you like, and sort of show how collaboration can happen when you bring talent together. But most importantly, I think, is what you're actually doing in the music industry. And I don't know, you could not have found like a better sort of example of how through the crisis that we've experienced, the pandemic, about how good things can come from that. Although your business actually didn't start on the basis of COVID, it was really founded on the basis of discovery. And if I think about that concept of discovery and how it's played out with what you're actually doing with music, it kind of says it all, really. It's discovery, right? Because, you know, you're about trying to link really talented musicians with people that are responsible for the music industry and bringing that talent together. And we, you know, it's been talked about for decades, like artists having like struggles with music companies and who owns rights and who owns doesn't. And like every wannabe singer, we've seen them all on the reality TV shows. Like, you know, I sing in the shower, thinking maybe one day I'll be a star. No, I'm never going to be that. But tell me a little bit about that passion, this idea of like, how can you, and you describe it, you say, you know, that you are about the discovery of talent, that you have a passion for music and music discovery. What does that mean, guys? A passion for music and music discovery, and that your role is to serve artists and the music industry. Wow.
Thanks. That's a big introduction for us to try and live up to. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Look, we came across Andrson and the technology we've built from our own pain point. As Zach said, we're managers, and we were sitting in front of our laptops day in, day out years ago, and going to gigs and reading blogs and relying on word of mouth to try and discover artists to manage and to work with. And it was like 2 a.m. in the morning one day back in the day when we could be sitting in a library together working. And Zach turned, he's like, why can't we automate this? And why can't we bring it back to what matters most, which is the music? And I think that's where the passion sort of comes into play, because myself and Zach wake up every morning, the first thing we think about is music. We go to bed, the reason we can't sleep is because of music. And it's that passion of, one, musicians have the odds stacked up against them, which is why we work in management to try and assist them. And technology, for better or for worse, can be an aid or a hindrance. And we wanted to build something that aided both musicians and industry folks. And again, we have this saying that we just beat on all the whole time. And it's the most powerful tool in the music industry is the human ear. And sure, technology can aid people, but ultimately it should just be aiding people to listen and make the right decisions.
Right. I think
Sorry, Zach.
No, sorry, just to add a little bit onto that, because you mentioned it as well, that it's been happening for decades. I think it's pretty safe to say, and I don't think it's pessimistic to say, that this idea of democratizing the music industry is a very lofty goal. I think musicians will always have the odds stacked against them, but it's our passion, our job, our almost an obligation to help them along with that. And the tools that the industry is currently using, as Neil was saying, don't focus on the music. They focus on aspects of the artist. So velocity metrics, streaming numbers, things like that. And they don't necessarily speak to the quality of the act or the potential tenure or longevity of it either.
I mean, it's fascinating to think of using, AI. We see a lot of technology being used everywhere, but it's the first time that I've ever heard of it being used in a very different way to help people discover artists by sound, right? And you think about and particularly in this kind of COVID restricted world, I mean, you're making it digital. People would go and listen to a live concert, go and sit in a pub, listen to somebody, playing the guitar, or, how did music got discovered? Some of the best musicians have been discovered playing in their local, pubs, clubs, whatever. But you often find, as you say, they're listening to they're not necessarily listening to the sound of the music. They're watching the audience around them and seeing how they react to it, but not necessarily taking into account, what is it about that sound, that uniqueness that artist has. Now, you've kind of made that possible because in COVID, nobody can go see anything, right? You can't see anything. Never mind about hearing anything. So, tell me a little bit about this concept of sound, right? Because, everyone thinks they've got to have a persona or a brand, but actually you're trying to strip away from that. You're actually getting to the core of what's really good music and how can you help the music industry focus on that in a way that narrows that focus down so that they can actually spend their time doing what the music industry should be, which is making that music and talent available.
Exactly.
They are part and parcel, I will say. So I think in order to truly succeed in the industry, artists do have to have that brand, have that point of view, have a purpose that drives them. But we're also all about prioritizing the right data at the right time. And for a fledgling artist who mightn't have the image already, but definitely has the sound, it's more important that they have that first, right? Because then anybody can help them craft a persona, can help them craft that image. And in fact, by getting involved with artists sooner, not only do you do things like drive down hiring or contract prices and things like that, deal prices, but you're able to aid in that sort of construction and ensure that they're reaching the demographic that they want to be and that you want them to be as well.
Yeah. Now you guys, managed to ramp this business up very quickly, right? You started it, less than 2 years ago, I think, about that. Yeah. And have raised, have got to raise lots of money for it, which means that people kind of see this as a really good business idea. How did you manage to get over 8,000 artists to come on board and go yeah, we like this idea. This is different. Why you? What was it? What was your value proposition that you were going to them to help them go hey, we want to change how you can make yourself come alive, how you get discovered. How did you kind of take that idea forward? Lots of people, entrepreneurs, would love to know that.
Yeah, I think you've sort of touched on it a few times, and it's tough using positive language around a global pandemic. But we've been incredibly fortunate that people are now focusing on digital discovery. So you're right, we've been working on this for a long time because the technology itself is state of the art and it's brand new and it's never been done before. But when we launched initially, We did it as a beta launch back in 2019 at the end of the year, and we wanted to make some changes before we went to market. And I'm so glad we did make those changes. I think one of the fear factors and best pieces of advice combined from other CEOs and other tech founders is don't be afraid of releasing your product. Get it out there as soon as possible and start getting feedback. Because based off that, we had a product that could succeed and could withstand initial scrutiny. It's not perfect. We're constantly adapting and building it. But I think that combined with the fact that opportunities have been decimated in the live industry for both discovery and for artists, and combining that with the opportunity of our platform, like we've had almost 100 artists connect and start collaborating with each other online thanks to Andrson, which is just like we've built it for discovery, but to see that we're also fostering this community of new music. And like one of our artists on the platform, one half is based in Denmark, the other half is in Chicago, and we've got a few collaborations happening, and we're going to have our first few releases. So I think the fact that we're all locked up, the fact that we have to focus on screens all the time allows people to look for better forms of technology and better forms of discovery.
I think, like, you can hear it in your voice as you talk about it, the passion that clearly comes from like what you have brought to market, which is much more than a product, right? It is, it's a special kind of collaboration. It's a kind of way of bringing not just music together, but people together. I kind of sense from this, it really is doing that. What I found really interesting, which I think, if listeners go back, I'd say go back and rewind just the bit that you said about, hey, the advice that you got was like, launch it even if it's not perfect, because you'll get feedback. Because so often we're finding that, and that's a true nugget of like really valuable leadership learning that you've given, because a lot of companies and a lot of organizations where they're struggling is that they're producing products that nobody wants.
Yeah,
right.
They're not actually asking, does this work for you? But what you guys, it seems, have done is actually go and ask. Is that right? Am I
exactly? And I think the other element of it is that you can have an idea. Anyone can have an idea. What makes you an entrepreneur? What makes you a founder? What makes you successful is making that idea a reality, and that is scary. I think I was talking to some young founders recently, and they were saying they've got their idea, but they're not ready to share it yet. I'm like, start sharing it. We are all so busy doing our own thing. Like, Rita, if I told you our next project, you're not going to go off and do it. You're too busy running the most amazing podcast out there.
Well, thank you very much. Like, I don't know that it is, but thank you anyway.
But you know what I mean? We're all busy running our own careers, pursuing our own goals. If you allow someone else to hear your idea and what you're going to work on, realistically, they're just going to try and give you advice and give you some feedback rather than
Why do you think people are frightened of that? Like, what is it that stops people from doing that?
I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think we're still not quite out of the echo of business leaders or mentors or parents or whoever saying, don't share your idea. Someone's going to come and steal it, or you better patent that before you do it, or something like that. And I think there's this sort of like, it's not even really old school business mentality. It's just this older.
It's old school mentality.
But I think it still lingers a little bit. I think also on a personal level, for me anyway, I know I had to work really, really hard at separating the personal aspect of the business from the actual business and removing myself, and knowing that a misstep or a wrong feature or something wasn't a slight on my idea or on me. It was just a piece of feedback that I needed to adapt to make my product better or our product better. And I think a lot of people are afraid of hearing that because you're so fueled by this passion that
it's a part of you.
Yeah, it is.
I think the other element is the fact that The Social Network was one of the most successful movies of its time, and it centers around people feeling like their idea was stolen.
Yeah.
So I think that's gotta come.
That's an interesting insight. Do you think? And you know, again, I think it's a really important nugget of leadership advice that the world today isn't about trying to beat competition or to hold on to an idea. It's about, I'll keep using the word discovery because I think it's a very powerful word. It's about discovery, to share, to learn, to engage, to collaborate. And you seem to have, you know, they say music is a way of like bringing people together, ideas together. I mean, what better platform to do it than what you're doing? And by using technology, I mean, that just like brings, I mean, like you put the cherry on the cake, right? Like the icing was already there. You put like the final decadent piece to make this come together. I mean, it's exciting. So where do you see it going, guys? You know, how do you fuel this passion so that it takes it to another level?
I do think it's important to say, though we both really appreciate it, and no Sunday is complete without a cherry on top. I think our competitors, some of our competitors and some of our forebearers might think that they were the cherry. But certainly, I think it's not about beating the competition, but it is about the differentiation. And I do think that the way we differentiate is why we might be the cherry at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also important, if you're asking like where we see this going, we're trying to redefine music discovery. It's currently operating on some really great systems of user behavior. So if you like Rihanna and you also like Dua Lipa, there you go. But what we're trying to do is trying to broaden that scope so that you can discover musicians that nobody's ever heard of. They haven't been signed yet. You, as a fan, you have the opportunity to be a first fan. You have the opportunity to recommend it to a friend when they're only playing 100 cap venues, rather than only really getting to engage with an artist when they're already supported by major labels, which we all know is a real sort of dime in the rough opportunity. So we're trying to, I think as an end goal, it's being synonymous with music discovery and people understanding the power of audio driven and sound driven search.
And you've also, I guess, like, let's talk about it. Like, you know, you've done a great job of bringing kind of artists to the forefront to say, like, let's help you be discovered. But the music industry must be clamoring over you guys, surely. It's like you have, like, you know, the guys that are watching the figures must be going, this is great, because they're spending less money, because they're being much more targeted and focused in looking at some of the artists. But also, like, you're bringing a new inventive way, which means that they can actually discover more, right? They can actually gain more and bring more to the world in terms of music. So the music industry must be excited by what you're doing. Are they? Or are they threatened by it?
I definitely don't think they're threatened. Certainly so far, the response has been overwhelming. Again, it's like, I think in a pre-COVID world, it would have made myself and Zach's job a lot tougher, having to fly over to London rather than being able to hop on a Zoom call, being able to get someone's 15 minutes time and show them something rather than having to go over and schmooze them for a couple of hours and a couple of meetings. It has made things quicker, and it has made opening doors a lot simpler. I think it's also, though, worthwhile knowing is, like, again, when you've built something new, it takes a long time for it to be adopted. So I think we've had a really good 6 months from June to Christmas, establishing ourselves, establishing a new user base. And now this year is really about us scaling our company, leveraging the partnerships we already have and growing upon that to try and get real enterprise-wide solutions on board, and integrating with other larger platforms, which we're beginning conversations at the moment. But I think that'll be the real icing on the cake this year, / cherry on top.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about that, about like how you're kind of like, that aspiration that you have and some of the work that you've just launched. But I want to, let's get personal for a minute. That's all right. You two, you kind of just meet and just let's go into business together. So what's it been like? Let's talk about like, how do you, CEO, COO, two different personalities, two very different, a very common passion that brings you together, different backgrounds, voted, you're going to be two, I assume, like, not wanting to be like coming across as overconfident, but, Neil, you get voted as, named in the 30 under 30 list of entrepreneurs. Zach, you bought multi-million-dollar contracts, help like musicians and industries really come together. I mean, you two bring like a package together, but like, don't the egos clash?
Yes.
Never.
There's our personality type showing. 100%. I think one of our strengths is the fact that we definitely have that sort of yin-yang leadership style. We tick each other's boxes when we can't tick them ourselves. We both have very different skill sets. I think that's sometimes one of the hardest things when, like, again, I'm real young, still learning on the job. You'll always learn on the job, and as soon as you stop learning on the job, you need to change jobs. But I think, that's one of the biggest learnings is understanding that you can't do everything yourself, but also learning how to work very closely with someone. And that balance can be really challenging, especially when you're under pressure. And I think when you're a founder and you're running a company, it really highlights your weaknesses and being able to own up to them and not take things personally. Own up to your mistakes, try and fix them, ask for help, move on. That's how you grow as a person. And I think that's also really important in partnerships because you are relying on more than just yourself.
Yeah.
So have you been good at giving each other feedback?
What's that?
Have you been good at giving each other feedback?
Too good, maybe.
It's not quite daily, but we do check in. I mean, we're on the phone to each other pretty much all day, every day, in constant contact, especially now. And there is always this aspect of, as Neil said, yin and yang, sort of the give and take, the picking up where we might have a blind spot or where we need a pinch hitter or something like that. And then it always inevitably comes back to, sort of the end of the day debrief conversation where you might say, please don't ever make me do that ever again. Or thanks for taking that, but please don't ever do that ever again because you really mucked it up.
It sounds like a very healthy way of like being able to be authentic with each other and sort of share and recognize that and being honest, right? You said, of course there's clashes, which I think is helpful for people that are thinking of working together or working together to know that that's kind of natural, that it will happen, but it's how you kind of deal with it. Let's talk a little bit about your mentors. Have you had like any great mentors in this business? Because like it's a an industry that will have loads of advice, people wanting to give you advice on what to do. How did you decide whether to have the mentors that you chose? Talk a little bit about that.
They sort of pick themselves. Certainly I found that anyway. Like you're 100% right. We've had hundreds of people give us advice, but the ones that are really valuable pick themselves because their advice shines through. And it's the one that resonates best with us, or it's the one that they're willing to be so blunt and open and honest rather than just compliment. They're not there to compliment. They're there to advise us strategically.
Your tough love mentors, I call them, your tough love mentors. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah. It's like a combination. We do, I don't know, Zach, if you want to talk about some of them specifically, but like Tom Eagle has been like, who's a very successful CEO in Ireland, has been an amazing advisor to us almost since the very beginning, and has been constantly able to give us feedback from small things like new pitches, deck feedback, but everything to all the way to like strategic conversations around new clients. And then I guess the growing pains that every startup goes through as well. But yeah, I think you've also hit a nail on the head. Like everyone offers advice, and it's about understanding what advice is valuable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's nice that we sort of straddle the two industries because you have the opportunity to learn then from both sides of the coin. So Colin absolutely has been an incredible mentor to us. He's also a musician in his own right. I don't know that he'll willingly tell people this right off the bat, but he was in a band at one point.
We'll have to look that up. Listeners, we'll have to look that up and check it out.
But on the industry side, I think it's really important to have, or on the music industry side, I think it's really important that we have mentors there because we're not techies coming to the industry with what we believe is a solution, which is so often the case with music technology. We come at it having grown up with great mentors in the music industry that have made the venture into technology possible because we understand the landscape so well. And I think that's a huge asset.
It plays to, there are, I think your like purpose or your values, whatever you wish to call them, are pretty unique, right? We've talked about a couple of them, but there's one that, well, two that, the last two we haven't talked about, which I'm really intrigued by as well. A commitment to accuracy. Rarely do I see people talk about the commitment to accuracy. And I go, that's like intriguing. That's interesting. Like, where does that come from? And then I think back to what you're trying to do. So share a little bit about that, because that's a unique viewpoint to have, and why you chose that for its importance.
I think it comes down to time, right? I hate this phrase so much, but it is true. Time is money. Accuracy cuts down on wasted time, right? So for music discovery, basically what that means is more relevant results faster. And I think that was really key to us because, as Neil was saying, in those 2 a.m. library sessions, the databases we were using were completely inaccurate because they relied on user tagging and things like that. So for instance, when I moved to Ireland, I thought, oh, sure, I'll just find the next Hosier and we'll be happy out. And what we were finding was that girl groups were tagging themselves like Hosier because it's Hosier and they were expecting people to search for him. But that doesn't do anybody any good, right? It wastes my time. It puts sort of a bit of a negative image in my head about that band. And, you know, I might really, really like them in the end, but I'm not looking for them and I've just wasted my time. So for us, it was all about the accuracy that music analysis can bring, rather than the analog ways of user feedback or sort of the ancillary statistics that current systems sort of rely on.
So it's getting to the heart of what's really important, I guess, is what you're trying to say. It's like that it's really trying to get to like what's important. I like the term, by the way, I like the term time poor, right?
I like
You're
that.
time poor because you don't have all the time that you would like. So the time that you have, you've got to use it to the best advantage that you can. There is another piece. So that commitment to accuracy, I think it is so applicable, like beyond the music industry. So what you actually are posing and have done is so applicable across so many different industries, and different ways in which that could be used, that kind of thought process of how do you kind of connect what's important to a passion and to bring real insights into whether it's running a business, bringing music to listeners, to solving more problems, right? I mean, really, it's the intricate thought process that you guys have used to put that together that seems to hold true. And of course, you don't just stop at that, do you? You say, like, you know, one of the last thing that you talk about as being really important to you is around this constant strive for intelligent and relevant technology, but continuously learning. So this whole concept of continuously learning, and I'm like, oh yeah, everybody says that. Like, you know, I've said that. I wonder if it's true or not. But then I go and read a couple of your blogs, and I go, yep, crap, it is true. Like, and I'm sitting there and I'm writing notes of the things that I'm going to do, the habits that I need to do every day to kind of think about. And I'm taking away learnings from that and going like, wow, I've learned something new today that I need to focus on. And just recently this year, you know, you kind of gave this fresh inspirational insight about 2021 and how to look at that. So for you guys, that this learning actually goes beyond the business itself. It seems like you are committed to sort of sharing both personal knowledge, experience, and helping your musicians grow as individuals. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah.
Is that intentional?
I think we've both been really lucky in the community that we've like not grown up in, but like grown up in as entrepreneurs. And again, it's sort of like that coming back to the fear factor, but most people are very willing to help. And I think when you're on the receiving end of that, it's also a duty of yours to try and further share that knowledge that you've learned and normalize some of the stresses and anxieties that come with setting up a business. Because business is smoke and mirrors far too often than it needs to be. And I think one of the great things from COVID has been, like, we've been on Zoom calls and it gets interrupted by a screaming baby or a cat. And it's like, it's making people realize what matters most and why we're all here and why we're doing what we're doing. And I think if we can shed a small bit of light on our experiences, if we can offer up advice to musicians and industry folk and new entrepreneurs, then why not? And in terms of how we're learning, we're constantly, like, again, like, we've got a platform out there. It's really cool. It's doing a lot of great stuff, but we now have an obligation. It's not even well, it is a want, but it's an obligation. We've got 8,000 musicians on our platform. We're obliged to make our platform better for them. So it's, I think, it turns into an obligation once you start really sort of gaining some traction.
They say leadership is a choice that you make, and it's an obligation once you make it. So it sounds like that's exactly what you guys are doing. Now let's talk about something exciting, because you've also just launched something new, right? Or about to launch something new. And you were just
last week.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I can't wait to hear a bit about that. ReWrap.
Yeah, ReWrapped was basically, so we have our platform which allows industry musicians connect, and then we have our engine underneath it that runs all of our audio analysis. And the great thing about our engine is it can plug into any machine that other industry professionals use. And we want to demonstrate that because, again, we're in a world right now that it's easy to connect, but we want to make people understand how our technology works. So we decided to run a public test of it where you log in with your Spotify and we analyze your top songs that you listen to. And then we generate a playlist of new music that you've never heard. Because I think a lot of people sometimes get a little bit bored of some suggestions they get given music platforms, and we wanted to shake things up. So we did, and we launched it last week. And yeah, the response was amazing. We've had thousands of playlists created from people all over the world. And yeah, it's been really, really rewarding to see people interact with our technology in that way.
And so anybody can go do that. They can log on to it and just like check it out and try it and get a whole list of new artists to go listen to.
Exactly, yeah.
My husband's going to be so happy while I do that. He's going to be so excited.
Amazing. Yeah, so it's at rewrapped.andrson.com. It's currently only using artists in the Andrson database, so a lot of them are unsigned. But I think what we really want to highlight is the potential there, because if we plug that engine into another system, be that a streaming service like Spotify or Apple Music, or in with a major label and use their database, the opportunities are endless.
Oh, it's brilliant. Honestly, guys, it's been brilliant to talk with you and to learn more about what you're doing. Your passion is just like it oozes out. I always ask guests on the show to share with our listeners what their daring to moment is. So what they've dared to do, are daring to do, or the daring to learning moment that they've had. So each of you, what's your daring to that you would share?
Neil, you first.
my dare to moment is actually quite simple. We've built this audio search tool, and we're daring to be the new form of music discovery in the industry. Odds are always stacked up against new tech companies and new startups, but I think it's been really encouraging the last few months, the progress we have made. And so we're daring to be the number one in sound-based discovery.
And mine is similar and sort of opposite. It's dare to fail. The worst thing that happens is you fail. It sucks if you're skydiving, but if you're running a business, and if you're a leader, you've committed to being sort of the keeper or the captain of your audience's imagination, of your user base's imagination. There's a lot of trust that comes with that. And the worst thing that happens is that you don't hit the nail on the head, but you get up and start going again. So yeah, dare to fail.
Wow. What a fantastic sort of ending to the podcast. Brilliant advice for anybody that's listening. So if listeners want to get in touch, they want to know more about what you're doing, they want to access some of that, some of the technology that you've got, or they're an artist or a big movie, music industry mogul that wants to say why did I not know about these guys? How do they get in touch with you? What's the best way? Website, Twitter?
Yeah, everything. I think I was telling you earlier, we're one of those really annoying startups that decides to remove a letter from a word that everyone already knows. So we're called Andrson, but there's no E. So it's ANDRSON.com, and you can get us at Andrson Music on all social media. So yeah, absolutely reach out. We're always willing to have a conversation. We're always willing for people to tell us that they don't like what we did. Because that helps us learn. But yeah, hit us up. We'd love to chat.
That's great. And if you want to find out more about the Daring 2 podcast and you liked it, make sure that you click and say, yes, you liked it, then share it. And you can find out more about Dare Worldwide on www.dareworldwide.com. And you can follow me at Twitter on @Rita_Trahan. And if you really want to, you can find me on LinkedIn at LinkedIn in Rita Trahan. It's been great having you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I look forward to seeing your success. Your rise to success continues.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Enjoyed the conversation? Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of Daring 2. Also, check out our website, dareworldwide.com, for some great resources around business in general, leadership, and how to bring about change.